Rotax Max Challenge Karting Championship for 2016, proudly brought to you by Ed Murray Racing, Mojo Tires, Vortex Engines, XPS, and Rotax. The final round of the National Championship for 2016. Not one single championship decided till today. With not only championships up for grabs, but also coveted seats to take you to the World Finals in Italy. We'll pick up on the highlights of the Maxterinos. A very strong grid of just under 20 drivers. Kwanda Mokoena, the fastest in qualifying by 0.3, but check it out, all the way down to Tate Bishop to go outside the 1 second bracket, showing how tight the day's racing was going to be. The big swingers this time around, Mokoena, Visser, Variawa, Ulz, also a very strong competitor, so watch out for that gold helmet. Early on though, it was all about Mokoena and Visser starting to break away and check out of the field. They were the top qualifiers and started to show real good form at the beginning of the day. It was just towards the end of winter at the VKC circuit, and by the time the kids went out there for heat number 1 of racing, the track was in primo condition. Early on, we started to see the gaps develop at the front, but as always, some drivers were able to be brought back. It was the third place dice that had everyone on their toes, as Mokoena and Visser were starting to pull the pin and check out of dodge. Variawa was in a massive battle with Dolenchek, Alibi, and Ulz, and Wally starting to really show good form towards the end of the season. Very consistent track, VKC, doesn't tend to fade away towards the end of the day, and nobody was going to be catching Mokoena, who showed incredible form at the Port Elizabeth round, and always shows great pace at the technical circuit of VKC. Visser just could not close the gap, and at the end, himself and Alibi were all over each other, leaving Ulz to try and pick up the pieces of the big chase bunch. At the flag at the end of race number 1, it was Mokoena by almost the entire start-finish straight over Visser and Variawa. Confirmation then, Variawa getting onto the 3 spot. Dolenchek, Alibi and Ulz tripping each other up at the 3/4 marker of the race and out of the podiums. The Junior Max, also a championship on the line, as was the case with all of the races. Blaine Rodemeyer, he was fastest, but the gaps were very small within the top 6. Cam O'Connor, Sebastian Boyd, and Boyd came into this as the championship leader, so he was definitely the man to watch out for. He would be looking on point and trying to run the numbers out front. 4 races for this category on the day meant it was super important to get out front and get gone. It was O'Connor that showed clear air at the front early on and started to go into a breakaway. But remember, with Boyd, Dumini, Kutsia, Pitzer, Lincoln, Rebello, it was a very strong grid and there was going to be no breakaway. Everyone who tried to get out front and get gone were tagged, roped, and wrestled back into contention. At the halfway marker, O'Connor was happy to do the leading out front, but with Dumini and Kutsia, the 2 Cosmic carts working very nicely together to close up the gap, it started to get a little bit busy. Dumini was involved there, Kutsia was involved, and unfortunately, the kids started to get into real trouble. It was Dumini who was the big loser that time around, and if he was in with a championship shout at heat number 1, he was out of it by the halfway marker of heat number 1 of 4. Big changes up at the front there with just 2 laps to go, and O'Connor wasn't having it all his own way. Rodemeyer had made a big leap up front there to try and get around. Pitzer was always going to be the fly in the ointment, but unfortunately Boyd and Dumini, the big championship hopefuls, were out of it with just a lap and a half remaining. With 1 lap to go, a 3-car breakaway started to form. Rodemeyer, Pitzer and O'Connor, like he did at a couple of rounds earlier on this year, especially Port Elizabeth, looked like he had the biggest fight and the bit between his teeth. He was blocking and chopping lines, trying to cover his lines every single time out of the corners, and was holding his own breath coming to the flag. But it was O'Connor that came through and saw the flag with Pitzer behind him and Rademacher in the top 3. The big story, though, was championship points leader Boyd down in 10th place after that big get-together. Senior Max and DeLon Thompson was the man to beat coming out of qualifying, but the times were indicative of what would be an incredible day of racing. Only 0.8 of a second separating the top 10. DeLon and Delano locking out the front row, and it would be those two drivers that would start to break away early on. In fact, it was Thompson that was able to pull out nearly a half second in the opening lap. That would set the tone for the rest of the day, as the guy was on fire, leaving everyone else to literally pick up the pieces. Diaz, Lanz, Swart, Whiting, everyone were tripping over each other, trying to just run the numbers. Fowler looked like the tastiest driver out front, but it was always going to be a battle for second place, with Thompson just stretching his legs and just not feeling any pressure whatsoever. No one was able to fight back from those opening laps, but there was a breakaway for the 2 and 3. Lance was in an incredible battle, running in 3rd place, trying to get a move on, and she always seems to run good and come good right at the end of the season. V-Town VKC circuit in Vereeniging looks like a favorite of hers, but it was all about the Thompson show out front. Fastest qualifier, and he would be the first driver to go and try and clean house. A massive 2.5 second lead heading out onto the final lap. Almost unheard of as far as karting in national South African championship racing goes, but it did mean that everyone else was literally fighting it out for second place. Second place started to really close down, and it was looking like it was going to be Lance towards the end of it. She came good and did see the checkers second. Thompson with a massive win, then Stermin, Fowler, Diaz, Swart, Whiting, Jackson, Setinich, and Verheil rounding out an incredible top 10.
Well, I started 7th. I messed up my qualifying completely, but I got a big lead of 17 points. So I just needed to bank points in that race, and I got a 3rd, so the gap is still 17 points. So now there's 3 more races, and I just need to bank the points, and yeah, but it's looking good.
The first race went quite well. We've been struggling a little bit with the chassis yesterday, but we did some changes overnight, studying, not hardly sleeping. Did some changes this morning. It went a lot better, and the first heat went actually quite well. It got a bit hairy towards the end, but I managed to pull through and we got second.
Mini Rocks actually had the closest qualifying of all the categories. 0.013 separated poleman Variawa from Kurtzer. Kurtzer looked like the stronger man in the championship though, and he was going to be pushing Variawa extremely hard. Variawa did do a nice breakaway in the early laps though, but with a stacked field of Farie, Patrizi, Waberski, Diaz, Els, Mokoena. Mokoena, definitely a man to watch out for. Doesn't normally run as strong in this category as the other category that he doubles up in on the day, but would still be a key player when it came to the halfway point. He'd be able to bridge the gap and start closing things down. Variawa, even though he jumped away early on, quickly got closed down by Kurtzer, and it was Kurtzer Variawa locking things out at the front, allowing Mokoena to come through. Els, Farie, Patrizi, and Visser. Visser was the man to watch in the championship, but for some reason on the day, he was sitting outside of the top 5 early on and in deep, deep trouble as far as his championship hopes went. Towards the end of the race, things did get squeezed back. A lot of chopping and changing, slowing the numbers out front, bringing back the old concertina style that we love to see in this format of racing. And the top 4 were literally tripping over each other heading into the last couple of laps. That allowed a little bit of a squeeze back here. Patrizi and Visser saw a little bit of hope towards the end of the race, but it was too little too late. The flag came out. Kurtzer came good. Variawa, your pole man, got the 2 spot. Mokoena comfortable in 3rd place, beating out Els, Farie, Patrizi. The story though, 7th place for Visser. Not good enough for his championship hopes. In the DD2s, combined with the DD2 Masters, 2 men were at the top of the charts coming out of qualifying. Brad Liebenberg and Michael Steven. 2 men very hard to beat on the day. They would lock out the front of the grid and go straight at it, elbow to elbow, bar to bar, straight on. It was incredible to see a turnaround from Justin Allison, though. Seems to come good at this track also, and he was able to run with the top two big swingers early on, leaving everyone else to try and pick up the pieces. Monoretto, also a driver that is one to watch out for on this circuit, but he would unfortunately only come good later on in the day. He was sitting outside of the top five, duking it out with the likes of White and Hubbock. White also seemed to take a long time on the day to find his numbers on the page to be able to start climbing the ladder. Nick Verheul, Thomas, Fuller, Rochelle Duplessis as well outside of the top six in the early running on the day. White, though, was the big surprise because we know the kid can really pedal on a track like this. Just after the halfway knuckle, the top two had checked out. It looked like Allison was going to get closed down, though, as towards the end of the race, Brad Liebenberg was stretching it out. Allison had some time to live on, though, and it was Monoretto who was starting to climb the ladder and get a move on. But White charged hard towards the end of the race, got into some clear air in fourth place and broke away from the big chasers. Hubbock was now leading the freight train and trying to get out and get gone. Fuller was trying to close things down as well, looking for an overall top three in the Masters category, but 1, 2, and 3 on the page and on the track were looking like they were sewn up completely. Liebenberg at the front, Steven in the 2 spot. They put on a great show through the mid part of the race, but it looked like Steven just rolled out of it and sat back. He got the second place, but he obviously got the win in the Masters category. Allison, great turnaround for him, but unfortunately he got beaten out to third place. Monoretto came on strong, like we said, ahead of Hubbock, and Nick Verheul, 6, but 2 spot in the Masters. Join us after the break for more racing action from V-Town. We stay at V-Town, but we pick up on action right at the end of the day, the last gasp of the championship. Race number 4, starting things out with the Maxterinos. Still nothing decided in the championship, and nerves were definitely a factor. This was restart number 4, just showing how nervous the kids really were. Variauer, Visser, Mokoena, Ols, Dolenchek, Alibi, all the big hitters still running at the front, and everyone super nervous as these were the final laps on the 2016 season. Mokoena was definitely the man to beat. Dolenchek had been a little bit quiet throughout the day, but did start to climb the ladder in this heat particularly. Watch out for that red helmet, currently sitting in 5 on the track. He did pull his socks up and start to really come good towards the end of the season and towards the end of the final race of the day. Ols was there, again, just battling to really run the pace that we know he's capable of in that gold helmet. It was all about Mokoena just starting to run out front and start to break away. Visser was doing a great job for his championship hopes, finally getting onto the pace, sitting up there in third place. At this point, the championship, all the numbers on the page were about Mokoena and Visser. Towards the end of the race, though, it started to swing one man's way, and that man was Mokoena. He ran the numbers out front. He only looked like Variauer was going to go with him. Variauer was definitely trying to take it to the would-be champ, and they slowed the pace once again. That was the story of the day. As soon as 2 drivers started chopping and changing out front, brought everyone else back into the mix, and that was all good news for Visser. Towards the end of the race, though, a 5-car breakaway out front, and these would answer the question as to who would be champion. Going on to the final lap, Visser had a major problem on his kart, and he would not be able to complete the race, meaning that the championship would have to be decided on paper now, trying to work things out and figure out between Visser and Mokoena who would get the job done. For Mokoena, all he had to do was get across the line first and hope that it was enough to try and nail down the championship, but it was going to be an absolute nail-biter to try and get things square. Towards the line, that's all he could do, hold his breath. Dolenchek was starting to look good, as was Ols, but going into the last cutback, a last look over the corner, and a last look back for 2016, Mokoena now just had to hold his breath. Dolenchek confirmed with a 2 spot ahead of Ulls and Alibi.
From race 2, thought it was all over. Well, my parents just told me you mustn't give up until the last lap, and that's what I did.
Fantastic, man. And tell me, how was the pressure there?
Oh, immense. I just have to thank my teammates Akil for pushing me the whole way. If it wasn't for my doubts, I would have won the championship, so thank you.
How was the day's racing?
Well, Maxterino was a tough class to drive today. I got a win at second place and a second place. But unfortunately in the last race my part broke on the side and I didn't finish. But we're going to see how the points turn out.
And this is how it did turn out. A quarter of a point, making Charl Visser your champion. Junior Max, race number 4, all about Sebastian Boyd trying to pick up the pieces of his championship. O'Connor, such a dangerous man at the VKC circuit, but this was last chance saloon. Everyone else trying to figure things out. O'Doomany was going to be there. Rodemeyer, Boyd, Pitzer, Kutsia, Lincoln, Rebello, Rackstraw, Napier. Such a stacked field coming towards the end of the season. And VKC, not so much of a leveler as we've seen at particularly the Cape Town circuit and the top of the hill up at Adubi. VKC always runs a very close day and a very even match across the field. You always find that in the top 10, everyone's going to run on the same seconds. But it's very rare that you see 3 carts going into the triple left-hander together, and everyone was literally holding their breath. It was Dan Duminy that climbed the inside curb there in the all-white colors on his Cosmic cart to try and cling onto some kind of points coming out of the 2016 season. He was one of the drivers that did have a mathematical chance of a championship coming into this round, but after a bad result in heat number 1, he was always on the back foot the whole way through the day. This was the final few laps of the championship coming out of the Junior Max Championship for 2016. Remember, coming into this round, it was Sebastian Boyd who was the man to beat, but Boyd had a bit of a nightmare the whole way through at VKC. Everyone else knocking him out of the top 3 pretty much the whole way through the day. And O'Connor there in the right place at the right time to pick up the pieces. He was now starting to look like a huge threat in the championship. With just 5 laps to go, the top 5 were all over each other. Cam O'Connor didn't have anything to lose, and he started to put the big moves on, sliding his way through into a top 3 position. That kart was strong the whole way through the day, and he was the one driver that was able to bridge the gap to get up to the top 2 and start really hassling the back end of Duminy. Duminy currently in the 2 spot at this stage, but that was all about to change. Rodemeyer was in incredible form at the last race, but that was pretty much for bragging rights for him, just to say that he was the last victor on the 2016 season. For Duminy, he was trying to get as many points in the bag at this point as he could, and for O'Connor, it was all out. Throw caution to the wind, get as many points on the table and put as many carts between you and Boyd as you possibly can. Boyd by this stage had recovered and was up into 4th place, but coming down into the flag, it was Rodemeyer that took the final checkers on the season ahead of Duminy, O'Connor in 3rd and Boyd in 4th, and that would decide the championship. When it came down to getting the abacuses out and figuring it out, it was the most aggressive driver on the championship, O'Connor, that came good right at the end. Boyd lost his championship at the final round, and Rodemeyer got himself into 3rd place to get some points come the end of the day. The Mini Rocks only did the 3 heats, and for Mokoena, it was the undoing of the young star, as he had major problems coming out of the Peterson chicane, which basically makes up turns 1 and 2. He would be out of the top 10 for almost the first time this season, and that would really be a head scratcher as far as the championship went. Visser was definitely in with a shout, but the man looking the strongest was Josh Kurtzer. He was very well positioned at this final heat, at the final round of the 2016 championship, to go out there and really put his name in the hat to try and square away the championship. Variawa was good, but out of the championship, a hard run through the 2016 season up until this point saw him languishing outside of the top 5 on the points tally, but still was looking great for an overall finish at the final round at VKC. As always with the Mini Rocks, a big checkout situation. Variawa was there, Diaz, Kurtzer. You know what? A top 3 for Kurtzer was going to be a great points haul. He was staying ahead of Patrizi, DePava, and Alibi. And till this point, it still looked like there was a no-show from Mokoena, meaning there was just going to be no points on the table. Waberski also started to shine towards the latter laps of this race, and the man driving in the DAW colors, all in yellow, was starting to make a name for himself, following in those massive footsteps left by his dad. At the last quarter, the top three had done the big checkout, and it was between these three drivers, Variawa, Diaz, and Josh Kurtzer, who would take the final flag of the 2016 season as far as the Mini Rocks Championship went. Still no sign of Mokoena, meaning that it was done, it was over. And unfortunately, no sign of Visser either. The VKC circuit, not a good hunting ground for Visser, and the yellow helmet only just coming into shot at the back there, meaning he was running outside of the top five and by a long chalk as well. And with Kurtzer in this position, it's pretty much one hand on the trophy already. To confirm Charl Visser's position at this stage as well, 8th place, not good enough to get the big trophy come the end of play. Little bit of moving and shaking towards the end there and bumping and barging, but it really wasn't going to change up the championship. Variawa was still going to be the winningest man towards the end of the season and start to maybe move up in the championship, but not to the top spot. Variawa then, confirmation, Diaz and Kurtzer in third. That should see him as the champ. Confirmation then, Kurtzer coming good right at the end, winning margin of 4 points over Mokoena, who lost his championship in turn 1 of the final heat. For the senior max, it was all eyes on Dino Stermin. He was the man to beat and the championship points leader coming into the final round and also into the final heat on the day. He wasn't in the first turn problems, which meant he could run the numbers out front. Who was having a great time at the moment was Fabienne Lanz. She was able to turn her entire season round at one round and really start climbing the ladder. Stermin was in a very comfortable 3 spot in the early stages of the race. And as the reigning junior champion from the 2015 season, he was setting himself up to climb the ladder and go up through the ranks to try and nail down yet another championship. It was a tense race for sure, and everyone was doing the chase down. Fabienne Lanz had yet to see clear air on the day, but she was early on up there into a 2 spot and trying to make the moves to get on through. Thompson was still a hard man to beat though, but this time around, he hadn't checked out. The whole way through the day, he'd run almost a second, maybe 0.8 of a second faster than everyone else and had clear air and had run away. This time around, he had not been able to get off the leash, meaning that it was anyone's race. And finally, Fabienne Lanz did see clear air at about the halfway marker. It was a marathon, 18 laps that everybody had to do to wrap up their season. Fabienne Lanz finally saw clear air, albeit for around about 2 or 3 corners, and she got squeezed back by the hard-charging pack. Stermin had now caught himself up there, so it was Thompson, Fowler, Lanz, Stermin, and Yuri Swart, who'd been pretty quiet the whole way through the day, who was right up there in the mix. A very, very busy final race for this category of drivers. Pretty much no one had been left behind this time around, and it was going to be anyone's race. The marathon 18 laps would be the decider, and as we all know, if you ever get a chance to drive around the VKC circuit, you'll know that just 3 laps does hurt. Big change up at the front once again, with DeLon Thompson finally getting through on Fowler, and he would go on to try and break away. Fowler was in his own battle now. It looked like Thompson was just playing with the field in the early stages and then started to extend in the last quarter as if he found an extra gear on his kart, just showing how dominant he was at the VKC circuit. He took the final flag of the day with Fowler strong enough for the 2 spot. Fabienne Lanz in third and Dino Stermin fourth. Good numbers on the page, just beating out Yuri Swart in the top 5. In the championship, though, it was all about Stermin. He controlled it the whole way through the 2016 season. Lanz, though, climbed the ladder strong at the end for the 2 spot. The old Liebenberg Steven show was on cue once again to wrap things up for the 2016 season, and this would be our final bit of racing action for the South African Championship at least, until we start packing our bags, stretching the visas, and heading across to Italy. And everyone by this stage was starting to think about their first taste of that beautiful pasta. Right now, it was all about Liebenberg running the numbers out front and trying to break away from Steven. The two had put on an incredible show and display of driving the whole way through the day, but this time around, everyone else had figured things out. The man who was really on point this time around was Ben Hubbard. He was running in an amazing third place, staying ahead of White, Allison, Duplessis, Fuller, Thomas, and Whiting. But the top three had gone. Early on, it was all about Allison who went with the top two. This time around, it was teammate Hubbock who finally figured out the VKC circuit. The tiny, diminutive figure of Stewie White was in fourth place, heading up the freight train, trying to bridge that gap that had opened up extremely early on this time around. Back and forth we went. Mikey Steven and Bad Brad Liebenberg, the class of the field, showing a clean pair of heels to the rest of the field and starting to break away from Ben Hubbock. With that little buffer in mind and in hand, they were able to put on a show of dramatic driving, giving each other just enough space to try and run out front. This stage, it was Michael Steven who could dominate and control the pace out front, because the rest of the day was all about Liebenberg. With a longer race as well and a 7.5 kilogram penalty carried by all the Masters partners, it looked like the tyres were gone and a little bit of fatigue coming out of our multiple champion, Michael Steven. He was totally overdriving the kart and still managing somehow to stay on, not only stay on, but still hassle the back end of Liebenberg. All the while though, slowly but surely, Hubbock was closing the gap. But on the final lap, it looked like the 2-second deficit was not going to be better. The final flag of the day did go to Liebenberg. Steven got the 2 spots, and those would end up being your DD2 champions in the DD2 class and Masters standalone. Hubbock got third, ahead of White and Allison. Your champions, though, coming out of the DD2s and the DD2s Masters, your top 2 finishers, Bradley Liebenberg and Michael Steven, deserved champions. You've been watching all the action from the final round of the Rotax Max Challenge National Championship for 2016. Brought to you by Ed Murray Racing, Mojo Tires, Vortex Engines, XPS, and of course, Rotax.